The fallout from the Trump-Russia collusion bomb is continuing to spread like a mushroom cloud. This shows you how bold they are. This is the final piece that shows you the full extent of how embedded the State Department and George Soros were together in Ukraine. Well, we know the Russians tried to influence the election, but now we know that our own FBI, along with members of the Justice Department, tried to as well. Tonight, I'm going to reveal multiple cogs in the deep state wheel that tried to destroy Donald Trump's presidency. They're doing everything they can to create the appearance of guilt. They won't have anything.
Do you have concerns that they will attempt to prosecute you?
Well, certainly I do. I'll lawyer up. Already have.
It smells exactly like Russiagate 2.0. Oh my. Wait. Did you hear that? Wow. Hello, America. That video confirms a few things. First of all, I obviously have had a real problem with cake. My wife loves me because she's still married to me. But also, it's proof the Russiagate scandal, Ukraine, and everything the left has been up to from Obama through the Trump first term, then Biden. It has been a very long load and a very long road that we have walked together, and it confirms everything they've been up to. Now, I've at least tried to be a voice that gives you a look into the future, not stuck in the past with yesterday's news and perspective. We have always looked forward. We've tried to connect dots and showed you what this means and what's coming. But in all of this, we've always had a few lingering questions, but now these are getting answers that we didn't have back then. And dare I say, this is going to get good. Over tonight's special and then next week's special, we put it all on a gigantic chalkboard. Next week, we're still working on this. But tonight, we're going to begin to pull back the curtain on the entire deep state apparatus. Bit by bit, everything is coming undone and being exposed. And over the next few weeks, both on TV and radio, I'll walk you through the full operation because it does matter. And I do think that people are going to at least be tried for these crimes. Whether they go to jail or not, I don't know, but the case is being made and it looks pretty overwhelming so far. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I showed you the declassified documents that Tulsi Gabbard released that appeared to show the direct involvement of President Obama himself. Well, he was directing the special services of the United States. The government was undermining the incoming Trump presidency. And I used the word special services very specifically because special services, that text showed up last week in what's called the Durham Annex. It was finally declassified and released. It was in something called a burn bag. It is only 29 total pages, but oh my gosh, they should have burned it in that burn bag. What is being revealed here goes way beyond what the mainstream media is reporting, if they report on any of this at all. Most of the headlines have really revolved on this page from the Annex. It is a memo from Hillary Clinton's election campaign headquarters that was obtained from computers at George Soros's Open Society Foundation. But don't worry, I'll come back to that little detail in Spooky Dude a little later on the show. But this states how Hillary Clinton personally approved a plan to, quote, smear Donald Trump by magnifying the scandal that put Russian and Putin and all of their doing, all of the hacking, because they loved Trump and preferred him over Hillary Clinton. That was the story, really. Remember, Hillary approved the plan. That's the headline. Didn't anyone with half a glass of common sense already know that by now? Russiagate was a hoax cooked up by Hillary Clinton, her team, a deep state, and a willing and giddy media. This latest release goes way beyond that and what's being reported on. But before I go into specifics, I do have to critique on how it's all been released. I would have released what we got last week first, before the ODNI released 2 weeks ago. Here's why. The ODNI release outlines the activities of the special services of the Obama administration. But the latest release, the second one, the Durham classified Annex, sets the stage. It answers the questions that we've been asking for 10 years now, and it ties everything together. Let me give you an example. Do you remember this?
Well, let's bring it back here at home here in Phoenix in a very interesting meeting on the tarmac at Sky Harbor International Airport. As ABC 15 has confirmed, former President Bill Clinton was in town and met up with U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch as she was arriving in Phoenix. Now, this meeting took place just hours before the release of the Benghazi report, so we asked her about it.
I did see President Clinton at the Phoenix airport as I was leaving, and he spoke to myself and my husband on the plane. Our conversation was a great deal about his grandchildren. It was primarily social and about our travels. He mentioned the golf he played in Phoenix.
It was primarily social? They held planes on the tarmac so they could have a little visit about golf? Hillary Clinton's emails were leaked all over the internet. There was an investigation going on regarding her use of the private email server. Benghazi, the State Department pay for play, all of that. And the Attorney General was meeting Bill Clinton in secret on a runway to talk about grandparents, travel, and golf. Sure. Now, we all knew this was bullcrap back in 2016, but we couldn't prove it. We didn't have access to the Durham Annex. Well, now we do. But before I get into that part, let's talk about the credibility of the Durham Annex just for a second, because you've probably seen it debated in the mainstream media or Democratic talking heads. To start, we have never seen this annex before because it was deeply classified and deemed sensitive intelligence. Now, we are not allowed to see it partially because it offered a glimpse into U.S. and allied collection techniques and sources, and I understand that. But the other part of why we were never allowed to see it was because it revealed too much of the Obama deep state, and we're going to get back to that. The Annex is primarily a collection of emails and memos that was shared with our intelligence community from a source with the code name of T1. Now, T1 was snooping on Russia's intelligence as Russia's intelligence was snooping on us. So in other words, Russia was spying on American people and organizations, and they were writing reports on the information they gathered. And then T1 was intercepting everything. They were spying on that group, and they would relay it back to us. Now, we don't know who T1 was. That's still classified. But it was probably, we think, a nation-state actor. My team's best guess is probably Dutch intelligence. Well, it's now public that they had penetrated the Russians as far back as 2014. This is just a guess, but it fits. The information T1 gives us shows memos and emails that Russians stole and analyzed from American entities like George Soros's Open Society Foundation, think tanks, and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, the memo I showed to you earlier that claimed Hillary personally approved the entire Russiagate smear was one of those memos. Remember that the Russians stole or spied on. They were relaying it to their people. We had T1, whoever that is, spying on them. They took that information and relayed it to us. Now, the people at the Open Society Foundation, home of Spooky Dude, Hillary's campaign, and other entities have all claimed, I don't remember anything like this. So that leads the mainstream media to say, see, it's all made up. Well, Durham's investigators thought otherwise. They believed that T1's information they stole from the Russians were composites of multiple communications. So in other words, it was credible. They didn't necessarily transmit, they weren't faxing the documents. They were transmitting. And then T1 got what was transmitted, and it looks like they were just taking pieces of what was said, and then T1 cobbled them together, okay? The CIA also considered it credible. labeling the information sensitive intelligence. And the CIA Director John Brennan immediately briefed Obama, Biden, Comey, and DNI Clapper on what was revealed. So everybody in the Obama administration was worried. Now, want to guess how the FBI reacted? Well, they deemed T1's intelligence not credible. No, not credible. They stated the reports had hearsay. Communications may have been exaggerated or editorialized, or maybe there were translation errors. Okay, all right, well, that's reasonable, unless you say the opposite of the FBI Steele dossier, which straight up verified with nothing. Nothing was verified. Zero verification in that. Explain why they disregarded the entire intelligence community, who all screamed at them that T1 was reliable. They said, nope, 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 we don't need to look at that. And then the Steele dossier, which everybody in the CIA and even the FBI knew was not credible, why did they investigate that one? Why was the FBI sitting on this? Well, it sounds like the Annex was credible. What else could they have been, sitting on the entire time? Well, this new classified Annex provides that answer in spades. Now, to set up this next point from the Annex, I want to reiterate, when the entire Clinton email scandal first went down, it didn't start during the 2016 election year. That's the way it's portrayed, and in memory, it tells us that. But I want to show you an article. Look at the date. It's 2013. It would be 2 years before Donald Trump declared his candidacy for president. Okay? I highlight this period of time because the FBI first got word that a foreign government might be trying to collude with a U.S. candidate 1 year after Hillary's hacked emails became public. But it wasn't Trump that was the target of the foreign government. It was Hillary Clinton. The FBI got word that a foreign agent, at the direct order of a foreign government leader, was scheduled to meet with Hillary Clinton, a person, in Hillary Clinton's camp, regarding some kind of plan. The plan is redacted in the Annex. But it freaked the FBI field office out so badly that they immediately requested a FISA warrant. Want to guess what happened next? The FISA request went to the heads of the FBI and went poof, gone. It was described as remaining in limbo. Okay. The FBI was scared that Hillary would be the next president, so they sat on the investigation, then warned Clinton about it in a defensive briefing. Now, compare that to how they treated President Trump during Russiagate. We haven't even started yet with the revelations from this Annex. Not only the new information, but what all this means for the future. So we're going to do that when I come back. And I want to take you right back to that tarmac meeting between A.G. Lynch and Bill Clinton. Can we now answer that question with facts? That's next. As a society, we've gotten too used to the idea that help is just a phone call away, that if something goes wrong, you just dial a number and somebody shows up. That doesn't happen all the time. It hasn't happened recently, especially. Supply chains break, pharmacies close, hospitals fill up, and suddenly that prescription you always counted on is now stuck in a backlog or just simply unavailable. Then what do? Well, this is where Jace Medical comes in. Jace provides emergency use prescriptions for the most common and critical antibiotics. They're all packaged to last. They're prescribed by licensed medical professionals, and they are shipped right directly to your door. They also offer emergency medications for things like diabetes and heart conditions and mental health, because being prepared is not just for natural disasters, it's for real life. If you don't have medication that you have to take every single day, if there's any kind of disruption, what happens? What happens to you or members of your family? You don't have to be a doctor to take responsibility for your own health. You just need to think ahead. And Jace gives you the ability to do just that, to put a plan in place before there's chaos. In a moment where everything feels so out of control, Jace Medical helps you take back a piece of control. Go to jace.com, enter the promo code Beck at checkout for a discount on your order. That's promo code Beck at jase.com. So everything we're talking about tonight is information from the newly declassified Durham Annex. Now, I'll get to this later in the show, but it provides new context for how the deep state operates, what they were most concerned about after 2013, how they distracted attention away from that, and who the major players were. Now, next week, I'll map all of this out on a gigantic chalkboard. We're going to map out the deep state, and it will be your guide to following their moves in the future and even predicting what they will do next. But that is next week. Right now, let's go back to some of the old questions this annex provides new information on. Let's go back to that tarmac meeting between Lynch and Bill Clinton. We all assumed that she was transmitting information regarding Hillary's emails and her server investigation. That's what we assumed, but as I told you at the time, we don't have any proof of that. We think that's what's happening. But now T1 has some insight on that meeting. Let me show you a memo on pages 3 and 4 of the annex. They were allegedly communications between then DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz and 2 members of the George Soros Open Society Foundation. The main Soros guy allegedly present is Leonard Bernardo, who was George Soros's director for Eurasia. What's his expertise? Well, he was definitely not involved. His expertise includes Ukraine. We'll get to that in a second. The memo characterizes the state of the Democratic Party. After the email leaks, as in short, a dumpster fire, it's chaos, okay? And they were worried, really, really worried. And that included President Obama. But Obama didn't want any scandals. So what did he do? As per this memo, quote, to solve the problem, the president puts pressure on FBI Director James Comey through Attorney General Lynch. Okay, wait a minute. Really? The fact that Obama might be wielding the Justice Department like a weaponized lever obviously freaks a few people out at the FBI. But then again, I guess higher-ups got involved. The FBI decided not to investigate. That's when they deemed T1's information not credible. At least that was their excuse. Even though the CIA and intelligence community believed otherwise, it didn't matter. So what did the FBI do? Even though a few FBI people had their suspicions that Obama might be using Lynch to weaponize the DOJ, the Lynch and Clinton tarmac meeting is mentioned. But the FBI instead, just like they warned Hillary previously on a defensive briefing, they decided to do the same for Attorney General Lynch. The Deputy Director, McCabe, and the FBI's Deputy General Counsel briefed Lynch. They described how they had possible intelligence that Obama was using her to collude with the Clinton campaign and everything else. So how did she respond to these allegations? Was it shock? Did she deny, say, how dare you, FBI? Well, no, not exactly. She just said, okay. She never denied any of these allegations. Well, the FBI thought that was odd. We all had questions over why Lynch and Clinton were never questioned further over their little meeting about golf on the tarmac. Do we have the answer now? Was it because Obama himself, as per T1, was applying all leverage to make this all go away? Well, we also know why all the questions ultimately stopped now. James Comey was so terrified of T1's sensitive intelligence that he used it as the reason for shutting down the investigation into all Clinton's emails completely. You remember how weird that was? She broke the law in like 1,000 different ways. It was really serious, top secret, sensitive information. Anybody else would have gone to prison probably for life, and they just stopped investigating? Well, this was the reason he testified to Congress, but we've never heard any of this until now. The fear was palpable. But why? What else was in T1's disclosures that was so scary to the deep state? Well, I showed you earlier, as you've probably seen in other reporting, how the communications between the Open Society Foundation and the Open Society Foundation mentioned a Clinton approval plan to divert attention from the leaked emails to Trump and Russia. There it is. We know that George Soros' Open Society Foundation was allegedly involved in all of this, or at least read in. But why is that significant? Why were they so concerned? Why was the Soros director of Eurasia the one involved? Well, remember, Hillary emails were not the only ones hacked. They also had the DNC and Podesta email leaks. And in those leaks, what did we find? We found out that the Obama administration was working directly with Soros in Ukraine. Directly. This is happening right as the FBI is doing their little dance with T1's disclosures. This little document was also leaked. It was written by George Soros himself and describes him basically taking over Ukraine. All of this is happening while Joe Biden is Obama's point man in Ukraine. Also while Hunter Biden is making millions at Burisma. Are you starting to see why the deep state was so worried now? And why T1 was the scariest person on the planet for them? Ever wonder why maybe we had to have a war in Ukraine? Because remember, T1 was spying on the Russians. They knew things that no one in Obama, Biden, or Hillary world could ever have you know about. Let me go back to the Annex and T1's memo. Let's talk about fear here for a second. The memo describes exasperation, which included the mention of, and I kid you not, quote, the entire deep state. It mentions the FBI will be used to further Russiagate narrative by using entities like CrowdStrike. Well, that's one more question we had. They were the firm the FBI used as a source to claim all of the email hacks came from Russia. But here's the kicker. The FBI never actually examined the servers. Did they just take CrowdStrike's word for it? I asked that question at the time. Why would they do that? Unless they were in on Hillary's plan to smear Trump. We asked a source of ours in the intelligence community on background what the proof was that Russia was ultimately to blame for the hacks. They said, and I quote, the only proof cited by the IC shows the IC based its high confidence assessment on forensic evidence identified by a cyber firm. It looks as though they just relied on CrowdStrike, end quote. Wow. So in sum, T1 provided intel that using CrowdStrike to further the narrative via the FBI was all part of the plan. Clinton's plan to smear Trump. And the FBI was all part of that, part of the puzzle, without ever analyzing the hacked servers themselves. Why? T1's information was pulled from multiple other sources, not just George Soros' Open Society Foundation, and it reveals a web of both government and non-government institutions. We have never, ever had a more complete look at the deep state than we do right now. And next week, we're going to use all of this, all of the information, we're working on it now, to put a giant map and map it all out so you can see it and understand. And it is important to understand why they were all so concerned here. It wasn't just Hillary's emails that they were freaked out over. It was all of the questions that I have been doing chalkboards on for over a decade. The answers were there. The leaks showed how the Democrats were rigging their own electoral process, hand-picking people like Hillary over people like Bernie Sanders. They also shed light on Obama's drone strikes. It sheds light on Benghazi, the leaked debate questions, and even the stealing of a country like Ukraine. The Democratic establishment's motivations became parallel with the overall deep state, and they all knew we are about to be exposed. They had to turn this entire thing into something else, and President Trump became their main target. The ODNI report a couple of weeks ago showed what the Obama administration was willing to do from the government side to help Clinton's plan in smearing Trump. But this new annex builds on that. Quote, Obama sanctioned the use of all administrative levers to remove all possibility of all negative effects from these email leaks. And this sensitive intelligence also claimed that Hillary had the support of these special services to push the Trump smear further. It was a distraction, all of it. All of the questions, now the answers are becoming very, very clear. And the worst case scenario appears to be exactly what happened. More in a minute. Hey, I want to share some good news, and I want to thank you for watching this show and being a part of the audience, because this is the most active audience, I think, maybe in the history of commercial radio and television. The things that you have done, preborn is just one of them. This year alone, you have rescued 38,000 babies. This year. Right now, hundreds of thousands of moms are awaiting the birth of their precious babies, and thousands upon thousands of babies are taking their first breath because of you. Your impact, your movement, your phone call, your donating of $28 has reached out and touched the eternities. However, the challenge of abortion has now reached the home front at exponential levels. The harmful pills, they are taking a significant toll on innocent lives. Vulnerable women are facing these situations more alone than ever before. I mean, some of our daughters are in their own bathroom upstairs by their room, and they are giving birth to a dead child, and they don't know what to do, and every day they have to return to the scene of that crime to put on their makeup or take a shower. I mean, it's a horror show. But through preborn, we have a way to reach them. In that fragile moment when everything hangs in the balance, for just $28, you can introduce at-risk babies to their mom through an ultrasound. And once she sees that precious life and hears their heartbeat, she is twice as likely to choose life. So donate a gift of any amount. It will go directly towards saving a mom and a baby's life. Just dial pound 250, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Glenn. That's preborn.com/Glenn. So how far down the rabbit hole does Russiagate go? How far up the ladder of power does it ascend? Where should we be focusing our energies? What's real, what's not? One of my next guest, he is one of the best researchers I've ever met. He's one of my favorite people. He's an actual journalist because he pisses people off on both sides. And he is one of the best researchers into government corruption. He finds this better than anybody else, I think. Peter Schweizer is the president of the Government Accountability Institute, the author of 8 New York Times bestsellers, including the most recent, which is Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye, While China Kills Americans. He is also the host of the Drill Down podcast and good friend. Peter, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Glenn. Thanks so much for having me.
So what to you, in reading everything from the ODNI and Tulsi, what to you is the big takeaway?
Well, I think the big takeaway is that there actually was a conspiracy in government. And I don't mean conspiracy in the sense of conspiracy theory. I mean in the actual criminal legal term, conspiracy, in which you had private actors, individuals with commercial interests at stake, like George Soros, working with elected and unelected government officials, working with deep state actors in the FBI to try to shape an American election. And I think, Glenn, we have to step back and remember that this was really creating a fictitious conspiracy involving Trump and the Russians to cover up an actual conspiracy, and that was the Clinton and the Clinton team's dealings with Russia. You and I talked about this 10 years ago on your show repeatedly in 2015 and 2016. Remember, the Clinton Foundation got $145 million by helping procure the sale of Uranium One, an American uranium company, to the Russian government. We also talked about the fact that when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she executed a very corrupt program at the State Department called Skolkovo, which was designed to help the Russians develop their own version of Silicon Valley. What could go wrong? And of course, what went wrong is that we now know that the Russians, among other things, developed their hypersonic cruise missile as a result of Clinton's Skolkovo program. And then let's also remember that John Podesta, who was her campaign chairman and advisor when she was Secretary of State, was on the board of a small energy company called Juul Energy out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. John Podesta's company received $40 million in capital investment from an investment firm called Rusnano, which is a sovereign wealth fund of Russia run by Vladimir Putin. So there was an exchange of money, there was collaboration, there were favors done with political actors, but it was the Clinton campaign. And as Jeff Gerth reported in Columbia Journalism Review a couple of years ago, they saw this issue as a key vulnerability, so they decided to flip it on its head and really say that it was Donald Trump collaborating, not them.
You know, it's amazing because I think it was Bill Clinton that taught politicians, if you just wait it out, you drag it out. You know, everybody was up in arms with Monica Lewinsky, and he kept denying. And then when it finally came out, he's like, what difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference. Nobody cared at that point. And that's exactly what they've done. They've tried to flip it on its head. And, you know, Peter, I think you and I spoke at the beginning of the impeachment thing, and my gut told me at the time, this was a phone call. There was really nothing wrong in that phone call. And look at how the teeth and the knives have come out. And when we started looking into Ukraine, we saw all of the same players, all the players that are mentioned here, all doing very corrupt things in Ukraine. And we're like, this is why. This has really nothing to do with Donald Trump. This is about getting away with. If he starts picking at all at the surface, it is such a thin veneer that they've got to stop him and keep saying that it's him that's the problem with Russia. It's him the problem with Ukraine. And it looks as though all of this has now been verified.
Yeah, no, it has, Glenn. And look, you deserve enormous credit. Other voices out there deserve enormous credit staying on this story, because what they've tried to do over the years, you know, Donald Trump, of course, literally got shot at with bullets. But over the course of a decade, they have tried to discredit this story. Oh, the Ukraine thing is ridiculous. Oh, the Clinton corruption stuff is ridiculous. Oh, the Obama stuff is ridiculous. There's nothing to see here. And like you said, they've had this waiting game. But the problem is, you know, some of us, including yourself, Glenn, we stuck on this story. We stayed on this story, whatever the consequence was, whatever the attacks, whatever the ridicule. And it is complete and full vindication. What we said happened. George Soros was not an invented bogeyman. You actually now have documentary evidence that his individuals, his staff members, were involved in massive election interference. And the FBI, the deep state, is actually real. Because let's remember, back in 2016, when you and I were talking about the Clintons in Russia, it was revealed by CNN that 5 FBI field offices had open investigations on the Clintons. They killed all those investigations, FBI headquarters did, at the same time that they killed actual field investigations that were initiated at the local level by FBI agents. They ginned up a fake one, saying that Donald Trump was involved in Russia, knowing that it wasn't true. So this is a massive reversal and I think real vindication for all of us who have stuck on this story so doggedly. And it shows that the truth never dies.
So I'm happy for that. I don't really care about vindication, and I know you don't either, as much as justice. And we've seen this, Peter, we've seen this over and over and over again. They come and go, all kinds of stuff. I mean, all the way back. Does this one stick? Does this one get through to the American people? And will people have to pay a price for this, including the press?
Yeah, I think the press has already paid a price. I mean, you look at the approval ratings of the mainstream press, they're lower than Congress's, which is a very, very low number. It's in the teens of approval. So the media's already damaged goods. And by the way, they're not going to get it back. The New York Times, CBS News, these entities that were so terrible on these stories, they're never going to get their reputations back. I think also if you look at the reputations of people like Barack Obama, he wanted to leave as sort of the calm elder statesman, the adult in the room. His reputation has been severely damaged. I think the real question... Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I saw a poll today that shows, I think it was like 71% of Americans think that he was involved in something illegal on this. It was an astonishing number.
Yeah, no, and people have become cynical, and rightfully so. I think where the rubber meets the road, Glenn, is the question I get asked a lot of time: is anybody going to go to jail? And that's really a two-part question. The first part of the question is, are there actually going to be prosecutions? We see this grand jury that has been launched, so that's the first important step. The second one, which I'm not as qualified to answer, is what crimes were committed? Because obviously, if you're going to charge somebody, you have to have a crime. I think clearly you have some individuals like John Brennan that appear to have lied under oath before Congress. That is actually a very serious crime. And I think if that happened, absolutely they should be prosecuted. Because otherwise, if you don't, people can figure they can lie to Congress with impunity, and we don't want that. But I think the larger question is, what can we actually do to reform these institutions like the FBI and like the CIA to make sure this doesn't happen again? Because I've known you long enough, Glenn. You're not interested in picking at old wounds. The whole purpose of exposing this is to make sure that justice is done and it doesn't happen again in the future. And I don't know if I've seen enough yet from the FBI and the Department of Justice, but they have got to clean house, and there have got to be some real reforms institutionally to make sure that the FBI doesn't feel they can wield this kind of power in the future to try to turn an election.
100% agree. They have not done enough yet. Hopefully, it's still to come. Peter, as always, thank you so much. We'll talk again. Back in a minute.
Glenn.
Now you see why these people are so willing to just flush everything down the toilet. I mean, everything is at stake for them. And at some point, we're going to hit a crisis. And, when you hit a crisis, that's when the truth sets in. And it's not comforting. You look around and you're like, what is there to help? You're expecting the system to kick into gear. We're seeing it in this. It doesn't kick into gear. Nothing happens. And the same thing with any kind of natural disaster we've seen. Power's been out for hours and hours, phones at 4%, stores are closed, roads are flooded. You get a feeling in your gut, nobody's coming. You're on your own. Well, for all of our technology, all of our infrastructure, we're never more than one bad event away from empty shelves and long lines in a system that just can't keep up. And when that moment comes, the only thing that matters is, what do you have on hand? What have you done to prepare? May I suggest you trust My Patriot Supply like I do. They provide emergency food kits that are high calorie, shelf stable, and easy to store and built to last. Because being prepared is about expecting the worst, but refusing to be caught off guard when the unexpected becomes real. Just go to mypatriotsupply.com/Glenn. Find out how to claim your free 4-week food supply and join millions of Americans who are preparing with My Patriot Supply. That's a 4-week food kit today at mypatriotsupply.com/Glenn. That's mypatriotsupply.com/Glenn. It has really been interesting watching the left and the media respond to all of these recent disclosures. I think the best way to describe how the Annex was described by the Democratic establishment, the deep state back in 2016 was basically panic. Denial and cover has been the only way through all of this, it seems. Now the question is, do they have any ground to stand on here? My next guest is here to answer that question. Sean Davis is the CEO, co-founder of the Federalist. Sean, thanks for joining us. I want to show you some headlines here. This one from the New York Times, and just get your reaction to these headlines. First one, Clinton plan emails were likely made by Russian spies, declassified report shows. Here's one from the Rolling Stone. MAGA's new Russiagate evidence was likely made up by the Kremlin. And the Washington Post had their own story. But let's start with these two headlines first. Are we reading? Am I missing something? Are they right?
No, you're missing nothing. And these people are professional liars. They were willing co-conspirators in a fraudulent conspiracy to defraud the U.S. and the U.S. government. They were part of a long-running illegal soft coup against Trump. They know they've been caught, and so they only have a few options. They can't tell the truth, because if they come out and tell the truth, they know their goose is cooked. So they can either lie or they can pretend none of this ever happened and covered it up. And I guess they've chosen that they're just going to straight up lie about it, which makes sense because it's what they've done for 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, they're really good at that. Let me go to the Washington Post story. It states the FBI investigated all this, couldn't verify anything, also claims there's no proof that Clinton, her allies, and the Trump administration concluded to smear Trump or colluded. The FBI didn't do a proper investigation. I mean, it looks to me like the Annex is showing exactly how the FBI obstructed any kind of justice from being done at multiple levels. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, and it's actually fascinating to me to see the depths of their dishonesty. So we were held hostage by a completely corrupt intel and law enforcement state and a completely corrupt media for really 9 years. This started in 2016. We know Hillary funded the dossier. We saw her and all her little acolytes come out and accuse Trump of being a Russian agent. We saw what Comey and Brennan and Clapper did. We saw how they set up Mueller to go after Trump. And what they are now claiming is, hey, all that stuff that we subjected to you two for years, all the stuff that we said, that never happened. Clinton never had a plan to smear Trump as a Russian agent. And if you believe that, you're a conspiracy theorist. Like, this is the stuff of psychopaths and sociopaths. We lived through it. We watched them do it. And now they're trying to tell us actually none of that ever happened.
But Sean, I know you have friends that you probably really respect and have always been paying attention and stuff, and they have just given up on this story because they no longer believe justice is going to happen. So what needs to happen? What evidence is missing yet? Or do you think you have enough for the grand jury to convene and go, okay, there's more than enough here to prosecute? What's missing?
Well, thankfully, a grand jury has been reported convened at the direction of Attorney General Pam Bondi. And from what I understand, they're handling this very smartly. So what the previous admin did is they found someone they didn't like, and then they cooked up crimes which had no basis, and they tried to ruin people's lives over stuff that was non-existent. So what they did to Trump. I think what the current AG and the current DOJ are trying to do is they're looking at all the documents. They're looking at every single shred of evidence they can find and to learn what story that tells them. And then next, they're going to start interviewing the people who made those documents and read those documents, and they're going to get their testimony about what happened. And then as they get those facts and learn the whole story, a story that was covered up, by the way, for years by a totally corrupt intel establishment. Then they're going to bring in the big players. They're going to bring in the Brennans and the Comeys and the Clappers and the Strucks, and they're going to start asking them some very serious, pointed questions and see if that comports with the documentary story and the testimony story they've learned. And what we're going to end up with, I think, is not, ticky-tack charges. I think they are very seriously looking at whether top intel officials and law enforcement officials were running a fraudulent conspiracy against the U.S. And those guys, they better lawyer up because they all know what they did, and we all know what they did, and the time for justice is coming.
What kind of charges do you think you're going to see from this? I mean, what do you charge these guys with?
Oh, I think there are a number of charges. There's obvious false statement charges. If and when they're brought in before a grand jury, they decide to not tell the truth. I think there are charges about conspiracy to deprive people of civil rights under color of law. That was what was done to Carter Page. It was done to Trump. I think we may see charges about conspiracies to defraud the U.S. For example, if the raid against Mar-a-Lago against Trump was done as part of a scheme to cover up their previous conspiracy with the Russia collusion hoax, they're not going to be saved by a 5-year statute of limitations that might have expired in 2021 or 2022. I think they are in very, very deep trouble for what they did to this country.
One of them will remain nameless on the program, quoted me the other day and saying, I'm not afraid. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not part of a government, cabal, et cetera, et cetera. And the way he said it just made me think, oh boy, you would not have put out this statement if it was a nothing, you just don't say anything about it. It's nothing. Why would you make such a big deal out of it? I think these guys might be afraid for the very first time. But do we have the Justice Department, and do we know where the grand jury is even been convened? I mean, if it's in Washington, D.C., forget about it. Where is it being convened, and do we have the Justice Department that is healthy enough to actually take this on?
Yeah, we don't know yet where it's been convened. There are rumors that it's been in Florida. There might be one in D.C. I suspect we might end up with multiple grand juries because, after all, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA are in Virginia. So that gets you out of D.C. into the Eastern District of Virginia. Who knows where else they may have been doing their little schemes to defraud the U.S. So I suspect we may see multiple grand juries in multiple jurisdictions, but time will tell.
Wow. Sean, thank you so much for everything. Appreciate it.
Thank
God bless
you, sir.
you. Good to see you again. All right. Tomorrow we'll have more on this. I mean, we need to tell this story over and over again because it's still becoming clearer every time I sit and look at it in my own mind. And this is something we all need to share with our friends. Because this one really matters. This is not about politics. This is about survival of the truth in our nation. So we'll talk about this some more on tomorrow's radio program. And then next week, the big chalkboard. And I'll be back in Dallas in our studios for that. From Florida, good night, America.